What up, everyone? I have a feeling today's gonna be a good one. I may not be a neurosurgeon, but brain is why I stayed in office. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Hillary. Wonderful. So, hope everyone's doing good. Hope everyone's doing fine. I got a quandary. How does a spider think? With humans, it's self-explanatory. We think because we think. It's pretty obvious. It stacked up for a while. But how does a creature go from sitting completely idle into sharp vigilance at a moment's notice? It's almost like it's some sort of a living facet of nature that is mostly nature and just a part living. You know, these ancient creatures, 300 plus million years old, they really do, they show us the bridge between the old and the new. And one beneficiary of the destruction of the ecosystem is the person who claims that human beings are otherworldly, that we are not connected to nature, because that would be dirty. Ooh. Those people are pretty weak, in my opinion. And those people end up having weak immune systems, non-coincidentally. Did you guys know that I'm banned from going to Fargo? I think I've talked about this before, but Antifa banned me from going to Fargo. I'd show up anyways. And I'm sure a lot of the chomos in LA that had their homes burned down, not to, say that everybody in LA that had their homes burned down is a chomo, but some of them are. They probably went up to join various Antifa groups up there now. I lose no sleep based on what I've seen with Trump classifying Antifa as a terrorist organization, because that's what they are. The Proud Boys manifested specifically because Antifa was so disgusting that people got caught up into funneling their energy into an anti-Antifa group. That's funny. Which doesn't mean that they're pho. That just means they get punched while reciting breakfast cereals and are not allowed to jack off unless in the presence of a woman, which leads to a lot of theories about, various circle jerks surrounding elective bishop women in the Proud Boys. And Gavin McInnes is an interesting character. He was very responsible for a lot of the brains behind Vice, and it's just a shame to watch that get caught up in, as I said before, Milo is a very scary person, but he seems to have gone downhill and downhill and downhill, drunker and drunker, as it will. Muttley, stay safe out there, bro. Don't burn up out there in Hell Land. You can come down here if you want to have a visit in Hell World. My couch is open. I sent Muttley the invitation to this podcast over in Sean Martin's stream, and I hope he sees this. Bro, stay safe. Don't get burnt up. Legitimately, though, my couch is open if you need someone to crash. Muttley, you are trusted in my book. Did you know there are entire offices in the Pentagon devoted specifically to propaganda? Yeah. I mean, it's been a open secret for a while, but that's exactly one of the things that came out of Operation Mockingbird. Get into that a little bit later. There's pedophile ink in the water right now. I've been saying 10 episodes go Nazi, Mason, 5 episodes, Nazi, last episode, pedophile. I apologize about that. I'm sure that's very negative, and not a lot of people want to hear that. But all this is hammering into practice, into a habit, if you will, of talking, and I am hopefully refining my talking now. The more I say things like, the more I know that I'm slipping. And I've been kind of depressed recently, thinking about old times, thinking about what I lost, but that's being stuck in the past. And I meditated for 2 or 3 hours last night. I'm not even joking. I sat here and meditated for 2 or 3 hours, and it came back to me, that depression shook off. I got to keep it pushing. You know, some people are so buck broken by Fox News and stuff like that, and adjacent parroters, that they think that leftists cause the LA fires to hurt rich people. Now, I can't possibly get mad at the people saying stuff like that, because if you say DEI, then you're closer, but you're also ignoring the main point. But if you say stuff like that, it's obvious that your head is still stuck in the George Floyd protest. Mind you, there are homes burned down that were part of neighborhoods that became mostly unoccupied during the protests. There were, on top of that, fires that were started in areas where no protesters were. There were, on top of that, video evidence of pallets of bricks being carried out into the streets via forklift in the middle of the night during a curfew. Like, that was very sketchy. I listened to the police scanners when the protests / riots were going on, and I legitimately heard the police officers arguing with each other. Like, one would say, "There's a raging fire," and another would come in, I'm right on the scene, it's only a little fire. And, like, that is wild, you know? There's obviously, like, a civil war going on in our state professional class. And what Joe Biden has done recently in the last 4 years is pump a ton of money into the propagandists. Now, if you want to know where the LA fires are coming from and why, you always got to look at the conspiratorial features of any sort of conspiracy, which is to say there's a benefactor. There's also usually some sort of a historically contingent piece of evidence to show that this has happened before, and if it benefits the same people, it'll happen again, and if it's not stopped. And we saw over the last year a populated area get completely leveled to the ground with plans to rebuild up on top of it. Now, whether that's Ukraine, whether that's Gaza, you know, the plans on the board for Ukraine to eventually win, for Russia to stall out, for BlackRock to come in and rebuild, for BlackRock and Israeli contractors to rebuild Gaza after smashing bodies into the ground so that it smells like corpses for the next 5 years, and for them to rebuild in Los Angeles. Now, the biggest thing to worry about isn't the Trump-Obama thing. No. The biggest thing to worry about is if he'll let Israel colonize the same areas that he is projecting United States presence in with Gazan slave forces as if they were the Soviet Union, which, mind you, it's pretty easy to see how the bad parts of the Soviet Union, how the bad parts of the Nazi Empire how the bad parts of Imperial Japan came into the American cluster and took advantage of their neighbors through a neo-encomienda system. And we have definitely become as bad or worse than the Soviet Union, just dressed up as something much, much different. Ultimately, a pendulum swing, not balanced. Now, Operation Mockingbird, as I said, was a CIA operation that worked with the media to shape narratives, and it popped off after the Kennedy assassination. Interestingly enough, we've gone over the Kennedy assassination, how RFK Sr. and JFK were going to label the American Zionist Council, now AIPAC, a foreign entity which would prevent them from interfering with our politics, and they scrapped that after killing our president. You see. And then they blame the Soviet Union, which is very, very funny. The same group of actors love to put African-American actors up and pretend that they're the ones really in charge, but everybody knows that P. Diddy's not in charge. Epstein was closer to the source, but he's not in charge either. It's Mossad that's ultimately, first and foremost, proudly and excitedly running child sex trafficking rings, human trafficking rings, drug smuggling rings all over the place. And you can see it very, very clearly if you study history for any matter of time with an honest source. You can check multiple sources. As long as they're honest, they'll give you the same general gist, which is that the CIA is behind like 80% of the problems in the last 60 years, and everything is completely screwed to high hell because of that. The Iraq War was probably the biggest tool that they used. It was a cattle prod of anxiety that they shoved up the American people's ass and shocked them repeatedly until they marched into the fucking slaughterhouse. But ultimately, like, what choice do most Americans have? You know, do you take the red pill and listen to Alex Jones rant in circles at 600 miles an hour, or do you take the blue pill and watch the same MSM clips over and over and over and over again until that's all you can think about? You don't have a lot of you didn't have a lot of options back in the day. Things have gotten a little bit better, but as the algorithms are, you know, they will have Kai Cenat being elevated over. Well, I hate to sound like Elon Musk, but straight up, anybody who's genuinely like putting on courses and stuff. Not me, because I suck at this. I have no experience, and I really should do way more research before I come on here with the episodes. But I hope to at least be some background noise that's contiguous without big gaps. I hope to get down my speaking better, so I'm nicer on the ears and not blowing out my microphone and blowing out people's eardrums with stupid ass songs that I'm singing at the beginning. Because I can sing, I'm just not adjusted to singing on a microphone. I'm just not adjusted to tuning my settings with one button here for singing and another for no. And straight up, if it's not real, whether it's an impression, a joke, or a song, it'll catch. It has to be, you know, from the heart. It has to come from a genuine source. So the problem isn't a lack of money, food, water, or land. It's not poverty. The problem is that we've given control of these things to a group of greedy psychopaths who care more about power than humanity. That was the comedian Bill Hicks. And that's a very, very, very accurate proportion of what's going on. You know, if I was China, if I was in charge of China, if I was Xi and I legalized the 3 cultural religions after defeating the Maoists completely and pushing them to the peripheries in the countryside, if I was Xi, I would be building up my defenses too. Because God only knows what people will actually freaking believe if they'll take AI at face value without having engineers show them what the code looks like and not understanding any of these things. We do have a gerontocracy. We do have a lot of our politicians walking around in walkers and with canes and falling down the stairs and getting all bruised up and blacking out randomly at the podium. That is the system that has been set up. And there's no Gen Xer that doesn't seem to have a mile of compromat behind them that has gotten into the office. Like poor old Matt Gaetz. I'm sure if he's Gen X or millennial, but still, that's rough. That's rough. Pour one out for Trudeau. We're not going to ever be able to get a level of comedy like that again, I don't think. Especially not from Canada. We're never going to be able to get a prime minister of Canada who wore blackface, who dressed up like an Indian, who did all sorts of crazy stuff. That's genuinely funny, you know? It's genuinely funny. And learn that if you're even like 70 degrees separated from like Fidel Castro, they will call you something that you're not. That's the old, you know, it's not been around for 30 years, but they'll still say Marxist, Maoist. And I hate that as much as any sane person who studied their history, but I just don't see it, brothers. I just don't see it. What I see is the American empire that has copied the tactics, the whataboutism, the gulagism, the state propaganda, and the snitching out your neighbor, and the jackbootedness of the people who go and march people to the gulags. It's ultimately just people. And the more you train people to do that, they might not like it at first, but eventually they get comfortable with it. The worse your society gets, that trickles down to their entire families. You know, you get the abusive guard, and he is abusive to his wife, and then the wife is abusive to the kids, and the kids are abusive to the pet. You know, it's just one big stream of it. The pain trickles down, you know. Speaking of trickle down, the Hells Angels are an interesting bunch. I've actually, in the past, studied them quite a bit. And they're real for not hurting Alexander Shulgin after telling everybody that he made massive amounts of a drug called DOM and sold it to both the Hells Angels and the Grateful Dead. And he was in network with the government for a long period of time. And the government eventually got pissed off with him when he wrote and released books called PCAL and TCAL, which are self-synthesis guides for phenylethylamines and tryptamines. It's interesting to read all the history of that. But I will still fight I will still fight. I'm a fighting Irish. I'll still fight a Hells Angel. Take that, you Hells Angel. Aces for Christ. Don't worry about the Obama-Trump thing. Really, really, truly. You know, just pray for the president. Keep a good attitude. It'll be okay. I really dislike Obama. I'm a big Obama critic. I've been an Obama critic for the entire time. And what's crazy about me is, like, I've always made enemies out of both left wing and right wing. I find something to piss off just about everybody. And if you've seen every episode of this podcast, you probably know that. But at the end of the day, I pride myself in being somebody without biases, or at least, you know, trying to get a hold of any natural bias that arises in me and focusing on what's true instead. It's time to peel the Band-Aid off. Ayn Rand was a man in a wig. Facts. I really hope Hollywood is finished, because it's not really Hollywood that's burning up right now. It's Altadena and the Palisades, and spreading out to the east. But you know, Hollywood is so evil. I just hope that's just tapped out. I hope Atlanta doesn't pick it back up. You know, Hollywood has done a tremendous amount of sexual abuse and assault, and they've normalized it, and they've, you know, been right there trafficking kids. Like, look at Justin Bieber when he was 13 having ditty parties. That is very, very sad. And as I said, there's squid ink in the water, and that's exactly why people like Digibro and Vito can go out there and exclaim that they are pedophiles and get people's attention drawn to them instead of the people who are actually doing this shit. So keep that in mind. And really, if there are people out there, you know, saying that this person's a pedophile, that person's a pedophile, this person's a pedophile, and there's no evidence of that, like in the case of Forgetful Jen, that is not a person you want to have around. Genuinely, it's a very bad behavior. I've even said that it increases, I've said this in the past, it increases the likelihood that you are a pedophile who's actually psychologically projecting on people, other people, and people you don't like, because you know in your heart that you're a sick fuck. The world came from communism, but in the fog of war, the world blamed itself, and they disarmed their noble population to allow the military to be the next vessel. You see, that's exactly how that ended up in the long run. But you must have the wherewithal of a warrior if you want to weather the storm while others whine and moan and idle their moments by wastefully. Have the heart of a warrior. But, you know, don't be mean. Also, don't be so nice that you end up stupid. Like, there are monks who sweep their feet to keep from stepping on bacteria, but that's absurd. You know, as I said, simple, humble, and involving yourself with people. Like, everybody needs a leader, I'd say. And so for some people, Buddha is the leader, and for some people, Jesus is the leader. And for some people, they have worldly leaders, princes and principalities, and some leaders are better than others, you know. It's good to have a leader. I always consider myself loyal to whatever leader I serve at the moment. And it always hurts me very, very much when that loyalty gets mistreated, but it is what it is, you know. Find good leaders. The last thing that would help anybody is arguing all the time. Either spend your time reminding yourself of all the things that you love and look for the helpers around the tragedies, or you can misuse your wit to isolate yourself, thinking that you're doing everybody a favor. I did this before, you know. I got the heart of a warrior, but I isolated myself pretty hard, thinking that, well, that'll just minimize the amount of weaknesses that I have if I just isolate myself and cut myself off from all my old friends. That way I can attack people, like, verbally, well, I won't list names so I don't get in trouble. That's the way I can go after verbally big time politicians and stuff over the years and years that I have without ever having to worry about anybody that I know getting in trouble because of that. It's not a viable tactic, I'd say. I've learned that you need your friends. You need to look out for your friends, and your friends will look out for you. And if you're all alone, if you isolate yourself, you just end up weaker. Trust me. Trust me. That doesn't mean taking anybody else as a friend. You know, you need to look out for abusers and users, but in general, you want to have as many friends as possible. You want to, you know, spread your presence as far as possible and let people know that you're here to help and you're not here to be taken advantage of. It's as simple as that. Oh, I've been seeing this a lot over the years, and I finally figured out anybody who's talking about pink cocaine or pink meth is not talking about cocaine or meth. That doesn't make any sense. From a chemical standpoint, they're very likely having a drug called methylone being cut into whatever they're, or just that's the only thing that it is, into what they're imbibing. So keep a lookout for that methylone. All right, guys, take care.